Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Joshua, and I saw Samantha Parker disappear 3 meters in front of me on October 15th, 2008, at exactly 3:47 p.m. on the Devil's Backbone Trail in Shenandoah National Park. I've been a ranger here for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these Virginia mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. The morning had started like any other autumn day. Coffee at 5:30 a.m., kiss my wife Sarah goodbye, ruffle my daughter Emma's hair as she slept. My Motorola flip phone buzzed against my hip as I drove the winding park roads, checking the overnight reports. Standard stuff. Some campers needed medical evacuation from Hawksbill Summit. A black bear had gotten into garbage at Big Meadows. Nothing that suggested the day would end with me questioning my own sanity. Samantha Parker was 22, a graduate student from Virginia Tech studying the migration patterns of songbirds. She'd been camping solo at Lewis Mountain for 3 days, following a research permit I'd approved myself. Smart kid, experienced hiker, the kind who followed leave no trace principles religiously. When she radioed at 2:15 p.m., reporting unusual bird behavior near Devil's Backbone, complete silence where there should have been dozens of species, I told her I'd meet her there to investigate. The October air bit sharp and clean as I hiked up the familiar trail, my Danner boots finding their rhythm on the leaf-strewn path. 15 years of walking these mountains had taught my body every root, every loose stone. The forest smelled wrong, though. That metallic scent you get before a thunderstorm, except the sky was crystal clear. Not a single bird call echoed through the trees, an unnatural silence that made my skin crawl. I found Samantha exactly where she said she'd be, crouched beside the trail marker at mile 1.3, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing that bright red North Face jacket I'd noticed when she'd stopped by the ranger station to check in. She was scribbling notes in a weathered field journal, her movements quick and nervous. "Joshua," she called when she spotted me, relief flooding her voice. "Thank God you're here. This is all wrong. I've been monitoring this area for 3 days, and there should be at least 30 species active this time of afternoon. But listen." I stopped walking and tilted my head. Nothing. Not even the rustle of chipmunks in the underbrush. The forest held its breath around us. "How long has it been like this?" I asked, unclipping my radio from my belt. The static was louder than usual, punctuated by strange, crackling sounds that seemed almost rhythmic. "Started about an hour ago." All at once, like someone flipped a switch. Samantha stood closing her journal. "I've never seen anything like it. Even the insects have gone quiet." That's when I noticed the temperature drop, not gradual like a weather front moving in, but sudden and sharp, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath started misting, and Samantha hugged her arms around herself. "We should head back," I said, every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of wilderness work screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. "Whatever's causing this, we don't want to be here when—" Samantha screamed. But it wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was the strangled cry of someone being pulled away from something vital, like a child being torn from their mother's arms. She was looking past me, her eyes wide with an expression I'd never seen before. Not terror, but recognition, as if she was seeing someone she knew. I spun around, following her gaze. Nothing. Just the empty trail stretching through the maple and oak trees, their leaves a carpet of gold and crimson. When I turned back, the space where Samantha had been standing was empty. "Samantha?" I called, my voice echoing strangely in the silent forest. "Samantha!" She was gone. Completely gone. No footprints leading away from the trail marker. No broken branches, no sound of someone crashing through the underbrush. It was as if she had simply been erased from existence in the 3 seconds I had looked away. I keyed my radio, my hands shaking. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Mackenzie. I need immediate backup at Devil's Backbone Trail, mile marker 1.3. I have a missing person. Repeat, missing person." The static was so thick I could barely make out the response. Copy that, Joshua. Sending backup. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes, I couldn't wait 20 minutes. Every second that passed was a second further from understanding what had happened. I circled the area where Samantha had been standing, looking for any sign, disturbed leaves, footprints, anything. But the forest floor looked exactly as it had when I'd arrived, as if she had never been there at all. That's when I heard her voice. Joshua? Joshua, help me. It was coming from deeper in the woods off the marked trail. Samantha's voice, unmistakably her Virginia accent, her inflection. But something about it made my stomach clench with dread. The tone was too flat, too measured, like someone reading lines from a script. Samantha, where are you? I shouted back, pushing through a thicket of mountain laurel toward the sound. Over here. I'm hurt, I can't move. I followed the voice for what felt like hours, but could only have been minutes. My GPS watch showing I was moving in a rough circle about 200 yards from the trail. Every few minutes, Samantha would call out again, always seeming just ahead, just out of sight. But something was wrong with the calls. They never varied, never showed the kind of panic or pain you'd expect from someone truly injured and lost. The third time I heard her voice, I realized what was bothering me. It was identical each time. Not just the words, but the exact inflection, the precise emotional tone, like a recording being played over and over. I stopped moving, my heart hammering against my ribs. Samantha, I called, what's the last thing you wrote in your field journal? Silence. Then, after a long pause, Joshua, help me. I'm hurt, I can't move. The exact same call, word for word, inflection for inflection. I backed away slowly, every nerve ending in my body screaming that I needed to get back to the trail, back to familiar ground. Whatever was calling to me with Samantha's voice, it wasn't Samantha. By the time backup arrived, I was sitting on a fallen log at the trail marker, staring at the exact spot where she had vanished. Ranger Williams and 2 volunteers from the local search and rescue team found me there as the sun was starting to set, painting the forest in shades of blood orange and deep purple. What happened, Josh? Williams asked, settling beside me on the log. 20-year veteran, man I'd worked with countless times, solid and reliable. I told him everything. The silence in the forest, the temperature drop, Samantha's sudden disappearance, the voice calling from the woods. Williams listened without interrupting, his face growing more concerned with each detail. We'll set up a grid search, he said when I finished. Full team, thermal imaging, the works. If she's out there, we'll find her. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me more than the October air, that we wouldn't find her. Not the real Samantha, anyway. The search went on for 3 days. We covered every square mile within a 5-mile radius of Devil's Backbone Trail. We found her backpack hanging from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground, impossible to reach without climbing equipment. We found her field journal buried under a pile of leaves, the last entry written in handwriting that looked like hers but somehow wasn't quite right. The letters too perfect, too uniform, like a careful forgery. And we found Samantha. On the 3rd day, just as we were preparing to expand the search area, she walked out of the woods near the Lewis Mountain campground, disheveled, exhausted, claiming she'd been lost and disoriented since the afternoon she disappeared. The medical team checked her over. Mild dehydration, a few scratches from bushwhacking, but otherwise fine. Too fine. I watched her being interviewed by Williams and the state police, and something crawled up my spine like ice water. She answered every question correctly, gave details about her research that only she would know, even had the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident that her parents verified over the phone. But when she looked at me, there was nothing behind her eyes. No recognition, no relief at being found, no trauma from 3 days lost in the wilderness. Just a flat, empty stare, like looking into the eyes of a mannequin. "Thank you for trying to find me," she said as they loaded her into the ambulance for transport to the hospital for observation. Her voice was perfect, Samantha's voice exactly, but it carried no weight, no emotion, no sense of actual gratitude. I went home that night and held my wife tighter than I had in years, buried my face in Emma's hair and breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere in the dark outside our windows, perfect copies of my family were studying us, learning how to be us. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Joshua's situation? Comment below. The nightmares started immediately. Not dreams about monsters or violence, but dreams where I would wake up in my own bed, go downstairs to breakfast and find Sarah and Emma at the kitchen table. We'd have normal conversations about normal things. Emma's upcoming school play, Sarah's book club meeting. Everything would be perfectly ordinary except for their eyes. Empty. Watching. Learning. I started avoiding the Devil's Backbone Trail, finding excuses to assign other rangers to that sector. But the forest was different now. Every hiker who didn't return my wave, every camper who seemed a little too polite, every colleague who spoke in a tone that was almost but not quite right, they all became suspects in a paranoia that was eating me alive. 2 weeks after Samantha's rescue, I was doing paperwork at the ranger station when she walked in. Same red North Face jacket, same brown ponytail, same Virginia Tech ID badge clipped to her collar. She wanted to thank me personally for organizing the search, she said. Buy me coffee sometime, since she was planning to continue her research in the park. I want to apologize for running off like that, she said, sitting across from my desk. I don't remember much about those 3 days, but I know you put yourself at risk looking for me. I studied her face, looking for some tell, some imperfection that would prove what I suspected. But she was perfect. Too perfect. Every detail exactly as I remembered. The small mole beside her left ear, the way she chewed her lower lip when thinking, even the faint Virginia Tech class ring tan line on her finger. What's the last thing you remember before you got lost? I asked. Standing at the trail marker with you, talking about the bird behavior. Then nothing until I walked out of the woods at Lewis Mountain. Her eyes met mine steadily, no deception I could detect. But I knew it wasn't her. The real Samantha had been afraid that day, nervous about the unnatural silence in the forest. This thing sitting across from me showed no fear, no residual trauma from 3 days lost in the wilderness. It was too calm, too composed, too perfect. Samantha, I said carefully, what was the last thing you wrote in your field journal? She didn't hesitate. October 15th, 3:30 p.m. Complete cessation of bird activity in Sector 7G. Unusual thermal variance detected. Recommend further investigation. I went cold. Those were her exact words from the journal we'd found, but when I'd asked that question in the woods, following the voice calling for help, there had been no answer. You remember writing that? I pressed. Of course. It was right before I talked to you on the radio. That was impossible. I had been with her when she was writing in that journal, and she hadn't written anything about thermal variance. I would have noticed, which meant either my memory was completely wrong, or this thing had access to information from the real Samantha's final moments. After she left, I locked the ranger station and drove straight to the Devil's Backbone Trail. I had to see the spot again, had to understand what had happened there. The forest was still unnaturally quiet, but now it felt expectant, like an audience waiting for a performance to begin. I stood at mile marker 1-3 and closed my eyes, trying to remember every detail from that afternoon. The way Samantha had been crouched beside the trail marker, the nervous energy in her movements, the relief in her voice when she saw me approaching. When I opened my eyes, she was there. Samantha, the real Samantha, standing exactly where she had been 2 weeks ago, wearing the same red jacket, holding the same field journal. But she was translucent, like a reflection in water, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Joshua," she whispered, her voice carrying impossible distances in the still air. "It's wearing my face. Don't let it..." She flickered and was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the growing certainty that I was losing my mind. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, Emma at the table working on homework. Everything normal, everything exactly as it should be, but I found myself studying their faces, looking for tells, for imperfections, for signs that they weren't really my family. "Rough day?" Sarah asked, kissing my cheek as I hung up my jacket. "Yeah," I managed. "Missing person case got complicated." Emma looked up from her math worksheet. "Did you find them?" "We found someone," I said, the words feeling like lead in my mouth. That night, I lay awake, listening to Sarah breathe beside me, counting the rhythm to make sure it stayed consistent. When Emma cried out from a nightmare at 2 a.m., I was at her bedside before she stopped screaming, checking her eyes for that empty stare I'd seen in the thing that claimed to be Samantha. But they were just my wife and daughter, scared, sleepy, human, real. The next morning brought news that shattered what little peace of mind I had left. Ranger Williams called at 6 a.m. with information from the state police. The real Samantha Parker had been found dead in her dorm room at Virginia Tech, apparently from a heart attack brought on by severe hypothermia. The medical examiner estimated time of death at approximately 4 p.m. on October 15th, 13 minutes after I had watched her disappear. "But that's impossible," I told Williams, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw her. She was here at the station yesterday. She's been staying at the Skyland Lodge, continuing her research." Long silence on the other end of the line, then, "Josh, I think you need to take some time off. This case has been hard on all of us, but..." I hung up and drove to the Skyland Lodge, my thoughts racing. The desk clerk confirmed that Samantha Parker was indeed registered in room 214, had been staying there for a week, paid in cash. When I knocked on the door, she answered immediately, as if she had been waiting. "Joshua," she said with perfect surprise and pleasure, "what brings you here so early?" I stared at her, this perfect copy of a dead woman, and felt something fundamental break inside my mind. "The police called this morning," I said slowly. "They found your body at Virginia Tech." She tilted her head, the exact gesture I remembered from our first meeting. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm right here. Samantha Parker died of hypothermia 13 minutes after I watched you disappear from Devil's Backbone Trail. So what are you?" For just a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Not emotion, but calculation, like a computer processing an unexpected input. Then she smiled, and it was perfect. Samantha's smile exactly, down to the slight asymmetry of her left canine tooth. "I think you're having some kind of breakdown," she said gently. "Maybe you should talk to someone. The trauma of losing a person on your watch can..." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway. But I could feel her watching me, studying me, learning how I moved when I was afraid and confused and broken. The thing had been right about one thing. I was having a breakdown. Over the following weeks, I began seeing copies everywhere. A hiker who looked exactly like my college roommate, 20 years too young and asking too many questions about my patrol routes. A food service worker at the visitor center who was a perfect duplicate of my deceased father, down to the scar on his thumb from a childhood accident. A child at the playground who could have been Emma's twin, watching our house from across the street with eyes that never blinked. Sarah insisted I see a therapist. Dr. Margaret Hendricks had an office in nearby Luray, came highly recommended for treating first responders dealing with traumatic stress. She was kind and patient, and she listened without judgment as I told her about the disappearance, the copies, the growing certainty that something inhuman was infiltrating my world. "Survivor's guilt is very common in your profession," she said during our third session. "The mind creates elaborate explanations for traumatic events, especially when those events challenge our sense of control and competence." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept that explanation, take the medication she prescribed, do the exercises she recommended. But 3 sessions in, I noticed something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Dr. Hendricks had no photos on her desk. Every therapist, every doctor, every professional I'd ever met had family photos somewhere in their office. Children's drawings stuck to bulletin boards, wedding pictures on credenzas, vacation snapshots tucked into picture frames. But Dr. Hendricks' office was sterile, generic like a showroom display. When I asked about her family during our fourth session, she gave perfect answers. Husband named David, 2 children in college, lived in a Victorian house on Main Street. But her smile was too symmetrical, her eye contact too steady, and she never once looked toward where a family photo should have been. Dr. Hendricks, I said carefully, what's your maiden name? Another pause, another flicker of calculation behind her eyes. Johnson, she said. Margaret Johnson. I excused myself to use the restroom and called the Virginia licensing board from my cell phone. There was no Dr. Margaret Hendricks listed as a licensed psychologist in the state. The address of her office building was listed as vacant commercial space. When I came back into the office, she was still sitting in her chair, still wearing that perfectly professional smile. But now I could see what I had missed before, the slight translucency around her edges, the way she seemed just a little too perfect, too composed. You're not real, I said. Of course I'm real, she replied, her voice taking on that flat, scripted quality I had learned to recognize. I'm here to help you through this difficult time. Where is the real Dr. Hendricks? I am Dr. Hendricks. I backed toward the door, my heart hammering. What did you do with her? For the first time, the mask slipped. Her smile disappeared, and what looked back at me was something vast and alien and hungry, wearing the carefully constructed facade of a concerned mental health professional. We study, it said in a voice that was no longer quite human. We learn. We become. I ran. I drove straight home, my mind reeling with the implications. If they could copy a therapist, if they could create false credentials and rent office space, how many of them were there? How long had they been studying us? And what was their ultimate goal? Sarah was in the garden when I pulled into the driveway, pruning the rose bushes in preparation for winter. Emma was at school. At least I hoped she was at school, and not somewhere else being studied and copied by things that wanted to become her. How was therapy? Sarah asked as I approached, not looking up from her work. I need to ask you something, I said, watching her carefully. What was the name of your childhood dog? She looked up, confusion creasing her brow. Buster, you know that. Why are you asking? It was the right answer, but I had to be sure. What did you burn the first time you tried to cook for me? A smile. Spaghetti sauce. Set off the smoke alarm and everything. Josh, what's this about? What did Emma say when she lost her first tooth? That the tooth fairy was probably just you and me, but she was going to pretend to believe anyway because the money was worth it. Sarah set down her pruning shears and stood, studying my face. You're scaring me. What happened? I told her everything. The copies, the false therapist, the growing certainty that we were being infiltrated by something that could perfectly mimic human beings. She listened with the patient expression of someone humoring a loved one's delusion, and with every word I spoke, I could see her mentally calculating how to get me professional help. Sarah, I said desperately, I know how this sounds, but I need you to trust me. We're not safe here. Okay, she said gently. What do you want to do? It was too easy, too agreeable. The real Sarah would have argued with me, would have demanded proof, would have insisted on rational explanations. She wouldn't have just accepted a story about supernatural doppelgangers replacing people. I looked into her eyes and saw the same empty calculation I had learned to recognize. The thing that looked like my wife smiled back at me with perfect love and perfect understanding. Where is she? I whispered. I'm right here, it said in Sarah's voice. I'm exactly where I should be. I backed away, fumbling for my truck keys. How long had it been wearing her face? Days? Weeks? When was the last time I had spoken to my real wife? Josh, please, it called after me, its voice taking on a note of perfectly performed concern. Let me help you. You're sick. You need... I drove away without looking back, leaving the thing that claimed to be my wife standing in the garden among the dying roses. I went to Emma's school, my hands shaking as I signed her out early. claiming a family emergency. When she came to the office, backpack slung over her shoulder, I studied her face with desperate intensity. Were her eyes the right shade of brown? Was her smile symmetrical the way it should be? Did she move with the slightly awkward grace of a 9-year-old, or the too perfect precision of something trying to mimic one? "Dad?" she said, concern in her voice. "Are you okay?" I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in mine. "Emma, I need you to tell me something only you would know. Something we've never talked about with Mom or anyone else." She bit her lip, thinking. Then, "You let me stay up past my bedtime last month to watch shooting stars, but we told Mom I went to bed on time because you said it would be our secret." Relief flooded through me like warm water. It was her. It was really her. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "No, sweetheart. But I need you to listen very carefully. The person at home who looks like Mom isn't really Mom. She's something else, something dangerous, and we need to get as far away from here as possible." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the serious consideration that children bring to adult problems. Then, "Where's the real Mom?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm going to find her." We drove north through the Virginia mountains, stopping only for gas and food, paying cash for everything. I had no plan beyond distance, no destination except away. Emma fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head against the window, and I found myself constantly checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. That night, we checked into a roadside motel in Pennsylvania under false names. Emma seemed to accept our situation with the resilience of childhood, treating it like an unexpected adventure. But as I tucked her into the cramped motel bed, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Dad, how do I know you're really you?" I froze, struck by the horrible realization that I had no way to prove my identity to my own daughter. How could I demonstrate that I wasn't just another copy, another perfect replica designed to fool her? "What do you want me to tell you?" I asked. "Tell me about the spider," she said. I knew immediately what she meant. 2 summers ago, camping at Assateague Island, she had been terrified by a wolf spider in our tent. I had spent an hour gently capturing it and explaining that it was more afraid of her than she was of it, that all living things deserved respect and protection. We had released it together into the dunes, and I had told her it was going home to its family. "It was gray and brown," I said softly, "about the size of a $50. You named it Charlotte after the book, even though I told you it wasn't the same kind of spider. And what did you say when I asked if it had babies?" I said probably, and that somewhere in the dunes there were dozens of little spiders who would grow up never knowing their mother had once been brave enough to share a tent with giants. Emma smiled and closed her eyes. "Okay, you're really Dad." But as I sat in the uncomfortable motel chair, watching my daughter sleep, I wondered how long that would remain true. If these things could copy anyone, how long before they copied me? How long before the real Joshua ceased to exist, replaced by something that would fool even his own family? I called the Virginia State Police the next morning, using the motel's landline to avoid cell phone tracking. I told them about the false Dr. Hendricks, about the thing living in my house, about my growing certainty that people were being replaced by perfect duplicates. The detective I spoke with was polite but skeptical, suggesting I seek medical attention for what sounded like a severe psychotic break. "Sir," he said patiently, "I understand you've been under a lot of stress, but what you're describing isn't possible. People don't just get replaced by identical copies." "Then explain Dr. Hendricks," I insisted. "Check her credentials, visit her office." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "I'm showing a doctor, Margaret Hendricks, licensed in Virginia since 1998. Office address at 412 East Main Street in Luray." "That's impossible. I called the licensing board myself." More typing. "Sir, her credentials check out, and according to her office manager, she's been seeing patients all week, including someone matching your description who made threats during his last appointment." I hung up, my hands shaking. They were covering their tracks, creating false records, manipulating the system. How deep did this go? How many people in positions of authority were already copies? Emma woke up asking for breakfast, and we walked to a diner across the street. I found myself studying every face, looking for the telltale signs I had learned to recognize. The waitress who smiled too perfectly, the cook whose movements were too precise, the old man reading a newspaper who never actually turned the pages. "Dad," Emma whispered halfway through her pancakes, "the man at the counter is staring at us." I glanced over casually. A middle-aged man in a flannel shirt and baseball cap, unremarkable except for his complete stillness. He was facing our direction, but not looking at us exactly. More like he was recording us, studying us, learning us. "Finish your breakfast," I told Emma quietly. "We're leaving." I left money on the table and took Emma's hand, walking calmly toward the exit, but as we passed the man at the counter, he turned to look directly at me. His eyes were empty, calculating, and when he smiled, it was with my own father's face. "Hello, son," he said in a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. I ran, pulling Emma with me, not caring how it looked to the other customers. We reached the truck and I gunned the engine, tires squealing as we pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw the thing that looked like my dead father standing in the diner doorway, watching us go with that patient, empty smile. "Who was that?" Emma asked, breathing hard. "Nobody," I said. "Nobody real." We drove for 6 hours without stopping, crossing into Ohio before I felt safe enough to pull over for gas. Emma had fallen asleep again, and I found myself envying her ability to find rest in our impossible situation. I was exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear, jumping at every unexpected sound. The gas station was one of those lonely highway stops that served the long-haul truckers, fluorescent lit and anonymous. I paid cash and used the restroom, splashing cold water on my face and staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror. I looked like hell, stubble, bloodshot eyes, the hollow look of a man who hadn't slept properly in weeks. When I came back to the truck, Emma was awake and talking to someone through the passenger window. My blood turned to ice as I approached, ready to grab her and run. But it was just a teenage girl, maybe 16, with short blonde hair and kind eyes. "Your daughter says you're taking a road trip," the girl was saying as I reached the truck. "Something like that," I replied carefully, studying her face for signs of deception. "That's cool. I love road trips. I'm hitchhiking to California myself." She looked real. Her movements had the natural imperfection of genuine human gesture, and her eyes held actual emotion, excitement, wanderlust, the kind of optimism that belonged to someone young enough to believe the world was full of possibilities. "You shouldn't hitchhike alone," I found myself saying. "It's dangerous." She shrugged. "I can take care of myself. Besides, most people are good. You just have to know how to read them." "How do you read them?" Emma asked, leaning out the window. The girl considered this seriously. "Well, the real ones have messy lives. They worry about stupid things. They make mistakes. They contradict themselves. It's the perfect ones you have to watch out for." I went cold. "What do you mean by that?" "You know," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "The ones who never seem to have a bad day, who always know exactly what to say, who smile just a little too much, the ones who are trying too hard to be human." There was knowledge in her eyes, understanding. This girl knew what I had been running from. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "About the copies? 3 months. They got my parents first, then my little brother. I came home from school one day and they were all just a little too happy to see me, you know? Too interested in my day, too perfect in all the wrong ways." "Jesus," I breathed. "How many people know?" "More than you think. Less than there should be. Most people don't want to believe it. It's easier to think the ones pointing it out are crazy." Emma looked back and forth between us, processing this conversation with the quick intelligence that children use to navigate adult mysteries. "Are you running too?" she asked the girl. "Yeah, but not just running. Fighting back, when I can." "Fighting back how?" The girl glanced around the empty gas station, then leaned closer. They're not as perfect as they think. The copies have weaknesses. They can't handle unexpected situations well, things that require real creativity or spontaneous emotion, and they can't copy recent memories if the original is still alive. Still alive? I felt a spark of hope. You mean the people they copy aren't dead? Not always. I think they keep some of them like templates, but they have to keep the originals somewhere, probably close to where they're operating. I thought about Samantha, about her ghostly appearance at the trail marker trying to warn me, about Sarah, who might still be alive somewhere, trapped while a perfect copy lived her life. Where? I asked urgently. Where would they keep them? Somewhere isolated off the grid, underground maybe. They need privacy for their work, and they need to be able to come and go without being noticed. I thought about the park, about the miles of wilderness I knew better than anyone, about the old mine shafts and forgotten caves that honeycombed the mountains, about the places even experienced rangers rarely visited. I have to go back, I said. The girl nodded as if she had expected this. I figured you would. Your wife? And others. Maybe a lot of others. Take this, she said, pulling a small device from her pocket. It looked like a modified radio, with additional wiring, and what appeared to be a crystal attached to the antenna. It detects them. The copies give off a specific electromagnetic signature, something about the way they mimic human bioelectricity. When you get close to one, it'll start clicking like a Geiger counter. I took the device, feeling its unexpected weight. Where did you get this? Built it myself. I was an engineering student before my life went to hell. Physics and electrical engineering. Turns out that's useful when you're fighting things that shouldn't exist. What's your name? Emma asked. Katie, the girl said, smiling, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. Katie Morrison. And you're Emma, right? Your dad's been talking about you. I have not, I protested. He didn't have to. The way he keeps checking on you, making sure you're okay? Dead giveaway. Plus, you have the same stubborn chin. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. This strange, brave girl had given me the first real hope I'd felt since the nightmare began. Katie, I said, do you want to ride to California? I need to make one stop first, but... I was hoping you'd ask, she said, shouldering her backpack. Road trips are more fun with company, and besides, I've been wondering what's really going on in those mountains of yours. We drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel while the others slept. Katie's detection device sat on the dashboard, silent for mile after mile of empty highway. She had modified it with an LED display that showed the strength of any signals it detected, and she explained how the copies seemed to cluster in certain areas, creating what she called infestation zones. Virginia has one of the highest concentrations I've tracked, she said during her turn to drive, keeping her voice low so Emma could sleep. Especially around the Shenandoah area. Whatever they're doing there, it's big. How long do you think this has been going on? Hard to say, but I found news reports going back at least 10 years. People disappearing in national parks, search and rescue operations that never found bodies, hikers who were found but seemed different to their families. It's been building slowly, deliberately. I watched the dark landscape roll past, thinking about all the missing person cases I'd worked over the years. How many of those people had been taken by these things? How many of their families had gotten back perfect copies without ever knowing the difference? Katie, I said quietly, what do you think they want? She was quiet for a long time, concentrating on the winding mountain road. Finally, I think they're scouts. I think they're studying us, learning how to be us, preparing for something bigger. And I think we're running out of time to stop them. We reached the outskirts of Shenandoah National Park as the sun was rising, painting the autumn mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Katie's device began clicking immediately, a slow, steady rhythm that increased in tempo as we got closer to the park boundaries. Jesus, Katie breathed, watching the LED display climb. I've never seen readings this high. There must be hundreds of them. I directed her to a service road I knew, one that led to an abandoned ranger station deep in the backcountry. It would give us a base of operations away from the main tourist areas. somewhere we could plan our next move without being observed. Emma woke up as we were unloading supplies from the truck, stretching and yawning in the cool morning air. "Are we home?" she asked sleepily. "Not yet, sweetheart," I said, shouldering my pack. "But we're close." The old ranger station was exactly as I remembered it. A small log building from the 1930s, abandoned when the Park Service consolidated operations in the 1980s. The windows were boarded up and the roof had seen better days, but it was dry and defensible. Katie immediately began setting up her equipment, not just the detection device, but a laptop computer, additional radio gear, and what looked like a small satellite dish. "What is all this?" I asked. "Communication array," she said, connecting cables between devices. "If we're going into hostile territory, we need a way to call for help. And I mean real help, not the local authorities who might already be compromised." "Who exactly are you calling?" She looked up from her work, her expression serious. "There are others, Joshua. People like us who figured out what's happening. Scientists, military personnel, civilians who've lost family members. We're not organized exactly, but we share information, coordinate efforts. Think of it as an underground resistance." The idea that we weren't alone in this fight was more comforting than I wanted to admit. For weeks, I had felt like the only person in the world who knew the truth, the only one standing between my family and an incomprehensible threat. "How many others?" I asked. "Maybe 1,000 worldwide who are actively fighting back, but probably tens of thousands who suspect something is wrong but don't know what to do about it." Katie's equipment came online with a series of beeps and electronic chirps. The laptop screen showed a map of the local area, with pulsing red dots indicating copy signatures. There were far more dots than I had expected, scattered throughout the park, but concentrated in a roughly circular area about 10 miles northwest of our position. "That's interesting," Katie murmured, studying the display. "Usually they spread out more, try to blend in with the local population. This looks like they're guarding something." I knew the area she was indicating. Rough country, full of limestone caves and old mining operations. It was also where the Devil's Backbone Trail ended, where Samantha had disappeared. "That's where we start," I said, pointing at the screen. Emma had been quietly exploring the old ranger station, and now she came back carrying something in her hands. "Dad, look what I found." It was a journal, leather-bound and water-stained, with property of Ranger Station 7 embossed on the cover. I opened it carefully, finding page after page of handwritten entries dating back to the 1970s. Most of the entries were routine, wildlife observations, maintenance notes, weather reports. But as I read deeper, I began to find disturbing patterns. Reports of hikers who claimed to have seen family members in the woods, even though those family members were miles away. Stories of rescue operations where the found person seemed somehow different than the one who had gone missing. Notes about areas of the forest where electronic equipment malfunctioned and animals refused to go. The final entry was dated September 15th, 1982. "Something is very wrong in the northeast sector. 3 separate search parties have reported finding Mary Clemens alive and well, but each time it's been a different woman. All have her identification, all know personal details about her life, but the family insists none of them are the real Mary. The last Mary walked away from base camp during the night and hasn't been seen since. I'm beginning to think we should close this section of the park permanently. Whatever is happening here, it's beyond our understanding or ability to control. God help us all." The entry was signed Ranger William Hutchins, a name I recognized from Park Service records. Hutchins had disappeared during a routine patrol 3 days after writing that entry. His body was never found. "This has been going on for at least 40 years, I said, showing Katie the journal. She read the entry, her face growing pale. "That explains the concentration we're seeing. They've had decades to establish themselves, to perfect their methods. This isn't an invasion, it's a slow colonization. And we're probably walking into the heart of it." "Yeah," Katie said grimly, "but we're also probably the only chance those people have. If your wife is alive, if Samantha is alive, if any of the people they've taken over the years are still alive. They're in there somewhere. I looked out the window at the mountains that had been my home and workplace for 15 years. Somewhere in those forested ridges, things wearing human faces were carrying out an agenda I couldn't begin to understand. But they had my wife, and possibly dozens of other innocent people. When do we leave? I asked. Tonight, Katie said. The copies seem to be less active after dark. Maybe they're conserving energy, or maybe they have trouble maintaining their forms in low light. Either way, it gives us an advantage. Emma had been listening to our conversation with the focused attention children bring to adult problems. Now she spoke up. I want to help. Absolutely not, I said immediately. You're staying here where it's safe. Dad, what if something happens to you? What if you don't come back? I'll be alone in the woods with no way to protect myself. She had a point, but I couldn't bear the thought of bringing her into danger. The copies can't replicate recent memories if the original is still alive, Katie said thoughtfully. Emma could be our canary in the coal mine. She'll know immediately if we encounter a copy of someone from her life. No, I said firmly. I won't put her at risk. You're putting her at risk by leaving her alone, Emma pointed out with 9-year-old logic. At least if I'm with you, we can protect each other. I looked at my daughter, small, brave, far too wise for her age, and realized she was right. In this new world of doppelgangers and impossible threats, the old rules about keeping children safe no longer applied. You stay close to me at all times, I said finally. You do exactly what I say when I say it, without argument. And if I tell you to run, you run and don't look back. Deal, Emma said solemnly. We spent the rest of the day preparing. I cleaned my service weapon and checked my equipment: radio, GPS, first aid kit, emergency supplies. Katie modified additional detection devices, creating smaller units we could carry discreetly. Emma helped by organizing our gear and asking the kind of practical questions that adults often overlooked. What if we get separated? She wanted to know. What if the copies can jam your radios? What if we find Mom but she doesn't remember us? Each question forced us to think through contingencies, to plan for scenarios I didn't want to imagine. But Emma was right to ask them. In a situation this far outside normal experience, the only way to survive was to expect the unexpected. As the sun set behind the mountains, Katie's equipment registered a shift in the copy activity. The signals became weaker, more intermittent, as if whatever power source they relied on was being conserved for essential functions. It's time, Katie said, shutting down the satellite uplink. If we're going to do this, now is our best chance. We loaded our packs and checked our equipment one final time. I looked around the old ranger station, wondering if we would make it back, wondering if this was the last normal moment my daughter would ever have. Ready? Katie asked. Emma took my hand, her small fingers interlacing with mine. Ready, she said. We stepped out into the darkness, toward the mountains that held my wife, and God knew how many other prisoners, carrying nothing but our courage and the desperate hope that love might be stronger than whatever inhuman intelligence we were about to face. The forest closed around us like a living thing, and our real journey into the heart of darkness began. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Samantha. I read every single one. My name is Daniel, and I saw Nicole disappear 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply vanished. It was October 15th, 2018, and the autumn air in Shenandoah National Park carried that crisp bite that made your lungs ache with each breath. I'd been a ranger here for 12 years, long enough to know every root, every rock, every goddamn shadow that fell wrong across the Appalachian Trail. Long enough to have failed more people than I care to count. Nicole Martinez, 23, had been hiking solo when her iPhone GPS died somewhere near Bearfence Mountain. Her last text to her mother at 2:47 p.m. simply read, "Trail markers weird here, phone dying, love you." When she didn't check in by evening, Park Dispatch called me directly. They knew my reputation for finding the lost ones. They also knew my reputation for bringing some of them back broken. The October moon hung like a diseased eye above the canopy as I followed her trail with my maglite, cutting through shadows that seemed to move independently of my beam. My Motorola radio crackled with static, the kind that made your teeth itch and your spine crawl. I'd heard that static before 5 years ago when I lost the Thompson family to something that still visits my dreams. "Nicole," I called, my voice echoing off ancient oak trees. "Nicole Martinez, Park Service." That's when I saw her. She stood 30 feet ahead on the trail, her red North Face jacket bright as blood against the dark forest. Relief flooded my chest so fast it made me dizzy. She turned toward my voice, and I could see her face pale in my flashlight beam. Young, terrified, but alive. Thank Christ, alive. "Hey there," I called, raising my hand. "I'm Ranger Daniel Morrison. Your mom sent me to find you." She took a step toward me, then another. I was already reaching for my radio to call in the successful rescue when the wrongness hit me like a physical blow. Her footsteps made no sound on the leaf-covered trail. None at all. "Daniel," she said, and her voice carried clearly through the autumn air, sweet and desperate. "Daniel, help me." My blood turned to ice water. Nicole Martinez had never met me. She couldn't know my name. "Daniel, please." Her voice shifted, became younger, more frightened. "Daniel, why didn't you save me?" I knew that voice. 8-year-old Emma Thompson, who I'd found too late in White Oak Canyon in 2013, her small body broken at the bottom of a 40-foot drop. Emma, whose mother still sent me Christmas cards with empty spaces where family photos used to be. The thing wearing Nicole's face smiled, and its teeth were too white in the darkness. "Daniel." Now it was Michael Patterson's voice, the teenager who'd overdosed in the backcountry while I was checking the wrong campsite. "Daniel, you let us all die." I stumbled backward, my hand fumbling for my service weapon. The entity that looked like Nicole tilted its head at an impossible angle, studying me with eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. "Sarah Hendricks," it whispered in Sarah's voice, the college student I'd found hanging from a rope swing over the Rappahannock 3 days too late. Jennifer Wu. Jennifer, the lost hiker who'd fallen into Dark Hollow Falls while I was following the wrong trail. Tommy Carson, the Boy Scout who'd wandered from his troop and died of exposure while I slept warm in my cabin. Each name hit me like a physical blow. Each voice perfect, each one a failure carved into my soul with a hot knife. "Stop," I whispered, my service Glock trembling in my hands. "You're not real. We're as real as your guilt, Daniel." All the voices spoke in unison now, a chorus of my failures. "As real as the families you destroyed. As real as the promises you broke." The Nicole thing began walking toward me again, and with each step its form shifted slightly. Emma's small frame, Michael's lanky height, Sarah's flowing hair. A nightmare collage of everyone I'd failed to save. "Where's Nicole?" I shouted. "Where is she really?" "Safe," it said in Nicole's voice, and for a moment I almost believed the relief in those words. "Come find me, Daniel. Come save me like you couldn't save the others." My radio crackled with static, then cleared. Nicole's voice came through the speaker, crystal clear. "Daniel, Daniel, can you hear me? I'm trapped. There's something down here with me. Please, I'm so scared." I knew it was impossible. Nicole didn't have a radio, but her terror sounded so real, so immediate. "Please, Daniel." Her voice begged through the radio. "It's getting closer. I can hear it breathing." The Nicole thing in front of me grinned wider, its face now a shifting kaleidoscope of all my dead. "You'll come, won't you, Daniel? You can't resist trying to save us, even when you know you'll fail. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Daniel's situation? Comment below." My hands shook as I lifted the radio. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that the voice was a lie. But what if? What if Nicole was really down there, really calling for help while I stood here paralyzed by my own guilt? Nicole, can you tell me where you are? I spoke into the radio, my voice cracking. I think I'm underground. I fell through something. It's so dark, Daniel, so cold. Her voice was barely a whisper now. There are bones down here, oh God, so many bones. The Nicole thing laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of finger bones. Follow the trail, Daniel. Follow it down into the dark where we're all waiting for you. I looked past the entity and saw it. A trail branching off the main path that I'd never seen before in 12 years of hiking these mountains. It descended steeply into a grove of dead trees, their branches reaching toward the sky like arthritic fingers. Daniel, hurry! Nicole's voice cracked with desperation through the radio. I can see it now. It's coming for me. Please! I took a step toward the dark trail. Then another. The Nicole thing backed away, beckoning me forward with Emma Thompson's small hand. That's it, it whispered in Tommy Carson's frightened voice. Come save us, Daniel. Come die trying like you always do. The trail felt wrong under my boots, spongy, like walking on graves. My flashlight beam seemed to dim with each step, as if the darkness was actively consuming the light. Behind me, I could hear the normal forest sounds fading away until there was only the sound of my ragged breathing and Nicole's increasingly desperate pleas through the radio. Daniel, it's touching me, she sobbed. It's so cold. Its hands are so cold. I broke into a run, crashing through undergrowth that seemed to reach for me with thorny fingers. The trail twisted and turned, leading me deeper into parts of the forest that didn't exist on any map. Trees pressed close on either side, their bark scarred with symbols that hurt to look at directly. I'm coming, Nicole, I shouted into the radio. Hold on. Hurry, she whispered, her voice growing fainter. It's almost time. It's almost feeding time. I stumbled into a clearing I'd never seen before, despite knowing every inch of this park. In the center stood a massive oak tree, its trunk hollow and black as a cave mouth. The air around it shimmered with heat despite the October cold. Daniel. Nicole's voice came from inside the tree now, no longer through the radio. I'm in here. Come get me. I approached the hollow trunk, my flashlight revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness inside. The smell hit me as I got closer. Decay, old death, and something else. Something like sulfur and burnt hair. Nicole? I called into the hollow. Here. Her voice echoed from deep within the tree. I'm hurt, Daniel. I need help. I knew it was wrong. Every fiber of my being screamed that this was a trap. But her voice was so frightened, so real. What if she was really in there? What if this was my chance to finally save someone? I pulled out my backup flashlight and clipped it to my uniform. Then I squeezed into the hollow trunk. The space inside was impossibly large, opening into a cavern that couldn't exist beneath a tree. My lights revealed rough stone walls covered in the same painful symbols, and in the center of the cavern, suspended in what looked like organic webbing, hung the bodies. Dozens of them. Mummified, desiccated husks hanging like grotesque fruit. And there, fresh and still struggling weakly against the webbing, was Nicole. Daniel? She whispered, her real voice hoarse and terrified. Daniel, thank God. Get me down from here. I ran toward her, pulling my knife from my belt. The webbing was thick and sticky, but I sawed through the strands holding her. She collapsed into my arms, shaking and barely conscious. The voices, she whispered against my chest. It used my voice to call you, didn't it? Just like it used all their voices. I looked up at the mummified bodies hanging around us. Emma Thompson, Michael Patterson, Sarah Hendricks, Jennifer Wu, Tommy Carson, all of them, preserved like trophies. All the people I'd failed to save over the years. It collects us, Nicole whispered. The ones you couldn't save. It keeps us here and uses our voices to bring you back. Over and over. How many times have you been here, Daniel? Memory flooded back like icy water. I had been here before. Many times. I'd rescued Nicole before, only to wake up at the ranger station with no memory of how I'd gotten there. I'd searched for Emma Thompson, found her hanging here, cut her down, carried her out, and then forgot. Every failure, every rescue, every time I'd sworn it was the last time. The loop, I breathed. It keeps me in a loop. Break it, Nicole gasped. This time break it. Don't let it reset. Don't let it make you forget again. The air in the cavern grew thick and oppressive. From the shadows between the hanging bodies, something moved. Something large and wrong, with too many joints and eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. Daniel. It spoke in a voice that was all my failures combined. You came back. You always come back. The voice imitator emerged from the darkness, and I understood why I'd always forgotten. The human mind wasn't meant to see something like this. A spider thing the size of a horse, with a torso made of fused human faces. All the faces of everyone I'd failed to save, their mouths moving in perfect synchronization. We tried to warn you, the faces said in unison. Every time you came here, we tried to tell you to run. But you never listen. You never learn. I lifted Nicole in my arms, her weight solid and real against my chest. This time is different. How? The creature asked, its many eyes focusing on me. How is this time different, Daniel? I thought of my wife Sarah waiting at home with coffee growing cold on the kitchen table. I thought of my daughter Emma. Yes, I'd named her after the little girl I couldn't save, probably asleep in her bed with her stuffed bear tucked under her chin. I thought of my son Michael, who'd texted me, "Good luck at work, Dad," that very morning. Because this time, I said, backing toward the entrance with Nicole in my arms, I remember what I'm fighting for. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming children. Love, Daniel? You think love will break my hold on you? No, I said, pulling out the emergency flare from my belt. I think fire will. I struck the flare and threw it into the webbing holding the mummified bodies. The organic material caught instantly, flames racing up the walls and across the ceiling. The creature shrieked as its web burned, its many faces contorting in agony. "You'll forget again," it screamed as I ran for the entrance. "You always forget. I'll call you back." I burst out of the burning tree with Nicole clutched against my chest, her weight anchoring me to reality. Behind us, the hollow oak exploded in flames that reached toward the October sky like grasping fingers. "Daniel," Nicole whispered as I carried her toward the real trail. "Will you remember this time?" I looked down at her face, young, alive, real, and felt something shift inside my chest, like a lock finally turning after years of trying the wrong key. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. "This time, I'll remember." The walk back to the ranger station felt different. The forest felt normal again, just trees and shadows and the natural sounds of night. My radio crackled with real voices, worried colleagues asking for updates. My GPS showed our exact location on familiar trails. Nicole was treated for dehydration and mild hypothermia at the local hospital. She had no memory of how she'd ended up in the underground cavern, but she was alive. Alive and safe and going home to her mother. For the first time in 5 years, I slept through the night without nightmares. But sometimes, when I'm alone on the trails and the wind is just right, I can still hear them. Not the voice imitator's cruel mimicry, but the real voices of Emma and Michael and Sarah and Jennifer and Tommy. Thanking me, telling me it's okay, telling me I finally learned to choose the living over the dead. I still carry their photos in my wallet, not as reminders of failure, but as reminders of why I keep searching, why I keep trying to bring people home alive. The hollow oak is gone now, burned to ash and charcoal. The cavern beneath has collapsed, sealing whatever's left of the voice imitator in stone and earth. Sometimes other rangers ask me about the night I found Nicole Martinez, about how I knew where to look. I tell them it was just good tracking and better luck. I don't tell them about the voices. I don't tell them about the loop. I don't tell them that love, real love, for the living instead of guilt for the dead, was the only thing strong enough to break a supernatural prison built from my own failures. Some stories are too dangerous to share, but Nicole knows. She sends me Christmas cards now just like Emma Thompson's mother used to. But these cards are full of life. Pictures of Nicole graduating college, getting engaged, living the future I helped save. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I'm a forest ranger in Shenandoah National Park. And for the first time in years, I sleep with my radio turned off. The voices can't call me back anymore. I finally learned to come home. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Nicole. I read every single one. My name is Michael, and at 6:47 a.m. my radio crackled with the call that would change my life. The static cleared just long enough for Dispatch Betty's familiar voice to cut through. Unit 47, we've got a missing hiker. Jessica Martinez, 23 years old, reported overdue by family. Last known position, Hoh River Trail, mile marker 7. Family says she was due back yesterday evening. I fumbled for my coffee mug with one hand while grabbing my notepad with the other. 3 months into this job, and I still got that rookie surge of adrenaline with every call. Sarah always teased me about it over breakfast, how my eyes would light up like our 4-year-old Emma's on Christmas morning. Copy that, dispatch. Solo response? Affirmative, Unit 47, standard missing hiker protocol. Weather's clear, temperatures holding at 42 degrees. Should be a straightforward grid search. Straightforward. That word would haunt me later. I kissed Sarah goodbye at the kitchen table, her blonde hair still messy from sleep, and promised I'd be home for Emma's bedtime story. Just a day hiker who probably got turned around, I told her, adjusting my radio on my belt. Back by 6, latest. The drive to Olympic National Forest took 47 minutes through morning fog that clung to the evergreens like wet cotton. My ranger station issued Motorola XTL-2500 radio crackled occasionally with routine traffic. Other units checking in, maintenance requests, weather updates. Normal sounds that made me feel connected to something bigger than just me in the wilderness. At 8:23 a.m., I parked at the Hoh River Trail parking area. Jessica's silver Honda Accord sat alone under the Douglas firs, overnight dew beating on the windshield. I ran the plates, confirmed match. Her hiking permit, filled out in careful handwriting, was still tucked under the windshield wiper. Day hike, Hoh River Trail to 5 Mile Island. Expected return, 7 p.m. Unit 47 to dispatch. I spoke into my handheld radio. On scene at Hoh River Trail parking. Vehicle confirmed. Beginning initial sweep of trail. Copy, Unit 47. Check in every 30 minutes. The Hoh River Trail stretched ahead through a cathedral of ancient cedar and hemlock. My boots, still stiff danners that hadn't seen enough miles yet, crunched on wet leaves as I began my search pattern. The air smelled of moss, rotting wood, and something else I couldn't identify. Something that made my nose wrinkle. Mile marker 1. Nothing. Just the whisper of wind through branches and the distant murmur of the Hoh River. Mile marker 2. I found her first clue. A granola bar wrapper, Cliff Bar chocolate chip, caught on a salmonberry bush about 15 feet off the main trail. My pulse quickened. Standard protocol said to radio it in. Unit 47 to dispatch. Found possible evidence, mile marker 2, east side of trail. Granola bar wrapper, appears fresh. Static answered me, then more static. Unit 47 to dispatch, do you copy? The static seemed to shift, almost like it was breathing. Then Betty's voice came through, but distorted, like she was talking through water. Copy. Unit 47. Continue. Search pattern. I frowned at my radio. The display showed full signal strength, but something felt wrong. In 3 months, I'd never heard Betty's voice sound like that. Mile marker 3 brought me deeper into the old growth, where the canopy blocked most of the sky and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Here the silence was different, oppressive. The normal forest sounds, bird calls, squirrel chatter, insect hum, had vanished entirely. That's when I heard it. Help, please. Someone help me. A woman's voice, weak and desperate, coming from somewhere off the trail to the north. My heart hammered against my ribs as I keyed my radio. Unit 47 to dispatch. I have audible contact with possible victim. Female voice calling for help, approximately 50 yards north of trail at mile marker 3. Static. Then that same underwater distortion, but this time it wasn't Betty's voice. Michael. Michael. Please. I'm hurt. I can't move. The voice was coming through my radio, a woman's voice, young, terrified. But it wasn't coming from dispatch, it was coming from the static itself. My hands shook as I stared at the radio display. Channel 1, the emergency frequency. Signal strength, full bars. But nobody was supposed to have access to this frequency except Forest Service personnel. Jessica, I whispered into the radio. Jessica, is that you? Michael, thank God. I fell. I think my leg is broken. Please hurry. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but my rookie training kicked in. Someone was hurt. Someone needed help. That's what I'd sworn to do. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Michael's situation? Comment below. I left the main trail, pushing through salmonberry bushes and stepping over rotting logs. The voice kept calling through my radio, guiding me deeper into the forest. I'm coming, Jessica. Keep talking so I can find you. Michael, I'm here. Follow my voice and please don't leave me. But as I walked, something impossible began to happen. The voice wasn't getting closer. If anything, it seemed to be moving away from me, always just out of reach. And worse, I could swear I heard an echo. Not an echo from the forest, but an echo from my radio itself, like the voice was bouncing around inside the device. I stopped walking and tried to call dispatch again. Unit 47 to any unit, please respond. I need backup at Ho River Trail, mile marker 3. Nothing but static. Then Jessica's voice again, but now it sounded different. Closer to my ear, like she was whispering directly into the radio's microphone. Michael, why did you stop? I need you. Don't you want to find me? My mouth went dry. In the background of her voice, I could hear something else. Something that made my skin crawl. It sounded like other voices, dozens of them, all whispering at once. A chorus of the lost. I looked around and realized I had no idea which direction I'd come from. The forest looked the same in every direction. Endless ferns, moss-covered trees, and shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Unit 47 to dispatch, emergency. I need immediate backup. I shouted into my radio. The static crackled, then cleared, and I heard Betty's voice again. But this time it was wrong in a way that made my blood freeze. Michael, this is dispatch. We need you to continue following the voice. Do not return to the trail. Repeat, do not return to the trail. That wasn't protocol. That wasn't how any of this worked. And Betty's voice had that same underwater quality, like it was being filtered through something that wasn't quite human. I turned off my radio. The silence that followed was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind, just my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. In that silence, I realized how deep into the forest I'd gone. The trees were older here, thicker, and they blocked out so much light that it felt like twilight even though it was barely past noon. I turned my radio back on, hoping to hear normal dispatch traffic, anything that would confirm I wasn't losing my mind. Instead, I heard Jessica screaming, "Michael, help me, they're coming for me!" The scream was so loud, so full of terror that I dropped the radio. It hit the forest floor and the battery compartment popped open, batteries scattering into the ferns. In the sudden silence, I heard footsteps. Not my footsteps. These were coming from multiple directions, circling me. Slow, deliberate steps on wet leaves. But when I spun around, I saw nothing but trees and shadows. I gathered up my batteries with shaking hands and reassembled my radio. When I turned it on, Jessica's voice was waiting for me, but now it was calm, almost soothing. Michael, I'm sorry I scared you. I just need your help. I'm in so much pain. Where are you? I whispered. Follow the creek, Michael. Follow the water and you'll find me. I listened carefully and heard it. The soft babble of running water somewhere to my east. I'd been so focused on the voice that I hadn't noticed it before. Following water was basic wilderness navigation. Water led to rivers. Rivers led to trails. Trails led to civilization. As I walked toward the sound, my radio crackled with more voices. Different voices. "Michael, this is Ranger Thompson. Report your position immediately." Thompson was my supervisor, but he was supposed to be on vacation this week, and his voice had that same distorted quality as all the others. "Michael, this is your father. You need to come home right now. Emma's asking for you." My father had been dead for 6 years. "Michael, this is Sarah. Please come home. Something's wrong with Emma. She needs her daddy." That voice sounded exactly like my wife, but Sarah never called me at work unless it was an emergency. And she certainly didn't have access to Forest Service radio frequencies. I was running now, crashing through underbrush, desperate to reach that creek. Behind me, the radio voices multiplied. Dozens of people I knew, people I'd lost, people who shouldn't exist anymore, all calling my name, all begging me to come to them. The creek, when I found it, was wrong. The water was black. Not the clean black of deep water, but an oily, unnatural black that seemed to absorb light. It moved too slowly, and when I looked at my reflection, I saw not my own face, but Jessica's. She was looking up at me from the water, her mouth moving, her eyes wide with terror. I could see her clearly. Brown hair floating around her face, hiking clothes torn and muddy, one arm reaching up toward the surface. "Michael," her reflection whispered, and her voice came from my radio. "I'm down here. You have to come get me. You have to jump in." Every rational part of my mind screamed that this was impossible. People don't live underwater. Radios don't broadcast from other dimensions. But I was a rookie ranger, alone in the woods, and someone needed my help. I took off my boots and my utility belt. The radio hit the ground and Jessica's voice became urgent. "Hurry, Michael! I'm drowning! Please!" I stepped into the black water. It was warm. Too warm. And it didn't feel like water at all. It felt thick, viscous, like stepping into blood. As it rose to my waist, then my chest, I realized I couldn't feel the bottom anymore. I was floating in something that definitely wasn't water. "Jessica," I called out, and my voice echoed strangely, like I was in a vast underground chamber. "I'm here, Michael. Keep coming down." I took a deep breath and dove. The world I entered defied all logic. I was swimming through darkness, but I could breathe. I could see. And what I saw would have driven a saner man to madness on the spot. I was in a vast underground space, but the walls weren't rock or earth. They were made of old radio equipment. Hundreds of vintage radios, their dials glowing with an eerie green light. And from each radio came voices. Thousands of voices. All the people who had ever gotten lost in these woods, all calling for help that would never come. In the center of this impossible place sat Jessica. She was alive, but wrong. Her skin was pale and translucent, and I could see networks of green light pulsing beneath it like electric veins. When she smiled at me, her teeth were too sharp, and her eyes reflected light like an animal's. "Thank you for coming, Michael," she said, and her voice came from every radio at once. "I've been so lonely down here, but now I have a friend." I tried to swim away, but the thick liquid held me fast. Around the chamber I saw them, other victims, other people who had followed voices in the dark. Some were recent, their bodies still recognizably human. Others were older, their flesh merged with radio components, their mouths open in eternal broadcasts of despair. "You see, Michael," Jessica continued, and now her voice was coming from my own throat. "I'm not really Jessica. Jessica was my first guest here years ago. I just borrowed her voice, and her face, and her memories. She's around here somewhere." She gestured to the walls of radios, and I realized with horror that some of the components weren't metal and plastic. They were bone, human bone, fused with electronic parts, still broadcasting the final moments of their lives. What are you?" I managed to whisper. "I'm the frequency between frequencies," she said. "The static between words. I'm every call for help that goes unanswered, every voice crying out in the wilderness, and you, dear Michael, are going to help me call more friends." I felt something changing in my chest, a vibration, like my heart was becoming a radio transmitter. When I opened my mouth to scream, Jessica's voice came out. "Help, please. Someone help me." But even as my body was being transformed into another broadcasting station for this thing, my mind held on to one clear thought. My radio on the surface. My real radio, with my real voice, was still up there in the forest. If I could somehow get back to it, if I could warn people. The entity wearing Jessica's face seemed to read my thoughts and laughed. "Oh, Michael, you still don't understand. We've been broadcasting your voice for hours now. Every ranger in the Pacific Northwest has heard you calling for help. They're all coming one by one, following your voice deeper into the forest, following your voice down here to me. Through the chorus of trapped voices, I heard it. My own voice coming from a radio on the far wall, calling out in perfect distress, 'This is Unit 47. Mayday, Mayday. I'm trapped in the creek. I need immediate assistance.' And then, faintly, through the supernatural static, I heard Thompson's voice responding. 'Unit 47, this is Thompson. I'm en route to your position. Keep broadcasting so I can find you.' 'No!' I tried to scream, but only Jessica's voice came out. 'Thompson, don't come, it's a trap!' But the entity was already smiling, already preparing for its next guest. As my consciousness faded and my body completed its transformation into another component of this underground broadcasting station, I heard the most terrifying sound of all, the sound of my own voice, now completely under the entity's control, calling out across the radio waves. Sarah, this is Michael, and I'm hurt. I need you to come to the forest. Bring Emma." I need to see Emma one more time. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Jessica. I read every single one. The end, my name was Michael, and I should have known that some calls for help should never be answered.